Hello everyone, this is the first video of MVC series and I'm sure that you know M stands for model, V stands for view and C stands for controller. Now what is model, what is view, what is controller? All these things we will see practically. Now from MVC, let us concentrate on C, that is C stands for controller. In this video, I'll show you what is controller, and there is one more term associated with it, that is action. So we'll try to understand what is controller and what is action from this video. To start a new MVC application, we need to go for file, new, project. And if you are using Visual Studio 2010, you will have ASP.NET MVC2 by default. If you want ASP.NET MVC3, you can install it from the portal, or you can Google that and you can install it, and it is free. Now I'll just select ASP.NET MVC3 application and I'll name it as my first app, and I'll browse it to d colon and I'll select the folder MVC videos and I'll say OK, and I'll say start this project, say OK. Now here it is going to ask me whether you want an empty project or internet application or intranet application. Intranet application will have by default Windows authentication set, and internet application will have by default forms authentication set with sample login and registration forms in it. But let us start from the scratch. That is, I want to move with empty. I want to move with an empty template. And view engine, as of now, let us keep the view engine as Razor. Now this is the major new feature of your MVC. View engine is Razor. The other view engine is ASPX. Now what is the difference between Razor and ASPX? We will see all these things in our future videos. As of now, I'm selecting empty template and view engine as Razor, and I'll say OK. So here we get our project, and the directory structure is as follows. It has content folder, controllers folder, models folder, scripts folder, views folder, a global file, a web.config file, references folder, and properties folder. So don't worry about the complete directory structure as of now. We will try to understand each and everything step by step. Now what is that I'll do? I'll simply execute this. I haven't done anything. I'll simply execute this. The error is nothing but resource cannot be found. Means what? You have nothing in your project. Now what is your request all about? What is that you are requesting? What is that it is looking for? In our earlier applications, like in our ASP.NET normal application, we were requesting some page. Say we were requesting department.aspx. There is no page. But here we are not requesting any page. Here we are requesting a controller. Say I want to access a page means what? I'm accessing a controller. Say I want to access the department page, so I'm saying department controller. So do I have any controller with me? No, I do not have any controller. So let me create a controller first. I'll right click on controller folder and I'll say add controller. All the controller names should be postfixed with controller, and I'll name it as department, and I'll say add. Now, if you observe, controller is nothing but a class, public class, department controller, which is derived from a controller class. So, controller is nothing but a class. Whenever we are sending a request to the server, means what? We are requesting a controller. Controller is a class. Normally, class will have n number of methods. As we know very well, class contains properties, fields, and methods. This department class contains a method called as index. Now, I'll just remove this. I have department class. In this, I'm going to create a method, say public, which returns a string, public string, get info. Method name is get info, and it is going to return welcome to Manzoor the trainer MVC series. Now I will add one more method to this controller, public string get info with date, and here I'm going to return the information along with date. Datetime dot now dot to string. Now I have a controller called as department, and it contains two methods. One is get info, another is get info with date. I will save this and I'll try to execute this. So before execution, let me make the things clear. I have created a class, simple class called as department controller, and I have inherited it from controller. And there are two methods in this. One is get info, another is get info with date. That's it. I will save this and execute it. As usual, we should get a message saying that resource cannot be found. We haven't requested a particular controller. Now I'll request a controller called as department, and I'll press enter. Should be surprised that still we are getting the same message, the resource cannot be found. Means what? You said that this is the controller that you are requesting or you are asking it to send the information, but you haven't said what method you want it to execute or from what method you want it to send the information. So this class is controller, and this method is nothing but your action. Department slash, I'll say get info. I'll press enter. Here you get the message. Welcome to Manzoor the Trainer MVC series. That means whenever you are requesting a controller and a particular action in it. That means a class and a method in it. So throughout your MVC subject, wherever you hear the term controller means a class, and wherever you hear the term action means a method. Now in the same way, I can request other action, that means other method, get info with date. Now I get the information with date. If I do not give anything here, that is your action name. Still it is looking for something. What is that it is looking for? By default, it will look for index action. Now let me go back to the code, write one more method here, public string index, and here I'll say return welcome to Manzoor the Trainer MVC series from default action. If you do not give any method name, it is going to execute index method. If your index method is not present, then it will throw an error saying that resource not found. If you do not write any method name or any action. Now let me execute. Here I'll say department. If you observe, I haven't said any action name. So by default, it is going to look for index action in the department. If it is present, it is going to execute it and sends the result back. If it is not present, it will say the resource cannot be found. See that I got welcome to Manzoor the Trainer MVC series from default action. So one point to be noted, that is every controller will have a default action, that is index. If you want to invoke index explicitly, you can do that. You'll get the same result. Or if you want to invoke some other method or some other action, you can say get info. So the default action in a controller is index. Here I'll write department slash get info. I'm getting the result. If I do not write the action and press enter, so it is looking for index action by default in department controller. If I do not write department controller, then what is that it is looking for? Definitely it is looking for some default controller. What is the default controller? The default controller is nothing but home. I'll just right click on the controller. I'll say add controller and I'll name it as home. I'll say add, and here in home controller I'll write public string index method which returns welcome to Manzoor the Trainer MVC series from home index. Now if I execute, let us see what it says. I haven't given any controller and any action. So by default, it is going for home controller and index action. If I want department controller, I'll say department. So in department controller, it is going for index, that is default action. And I'll say slash get info. Now in department controller, it is looking for get info action. If I do not write get info, it will go for index action. If I do not write any controller, then it will go for home controller and index action. Hope you are not getting confused. This controller folder will have a default controller, that is home controller, and every controller will have a default action, that is index. For department, index is default action. For home, index is default action. So I can have n number of controllers, and I can set one controller as default, and in each controller I can have n number of actions. Actions are nothing but methods, out of which index will be by default a default action, and if you want you can set some other method as default action. Now we understood that home is default controller and index under home is the default action. Now I'll try to change this to department as default controller and get info with date as default action. How? It is very simple. We should go for global.asx file, and in this simply replace home with department and index with get info with date. That's it. You need to edit a method, that is register routes, and in that you need to set the parameters for map route. So don't worry as of now much about this. Just replace home with whatever the controller you want to make as default, and just replace index with whatever the action you want to make it as default. Now if I execute, by default it should go to department controller and the action get info with date. Yes, we are in get info with date. Now if you want to go to home, here I need to say home slash, if I say home it is going to throw an error because now the default action is not index, the default action is get info with date. So we do not have get info with date method in this, so we have index, so we need to invoke it explicitly. So here we are. So that's it. This is very simple. Controller is a class and action is a method. So from here onwards we will never say class and method, we will say controller and action. So in our next video we will try to introduce view. So from this directory structure we have gone through controller folder and global file. So that's it for this video. Thank you very much.